Hello, and welcome to another episode of Roots and Hoots, a podcast project produced by the Legacy of Hope Foundation. Since 2020, we've been gathering, laughing, learning hard truths, and sharing in community conversations with Indigenous peoples across Turtle Island. Each episode, we learn something new, and we're excited to be sharing this journey with you. Roots and Hoots is about connecting with and celebrating Indigenous people's contributions to their fields of study, work, and cultures. We also speak with allies who share how they are furthering the work of reconciliation in Canada. To learn more about the Legacy of Hope Foundation and the work that we do, please visit legacyofhope.ca.
Welcome back to Roots and Hoots. Today, host Gordon is joined by Andrew Bomberry from the Six Nations of the Grand River Territory. Andrew is a Haudenosaunee man who shares insights into both historic and contemporary Haudenosaunee life. In this episode, they explore the history and significance of the Woodland Cultural Centre, formerly the Mohawk Institute Residential School, including the powerful story of student resistance in 1903. They discuss the Six Nations of the Grand River, the formation of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the importance of wampum agreements such as the Two Row Wampum. The conversation closes with a reflection on education and why reconciliation benefits everyone. Because, as Andrew reminds us, a rising tide lifts all boats. Please enjoy this special episode of Roots and Hoots.
Hello, Andrew. Good morning. How are you today?
I'm all right. Getting over a bug in the family, but we're all good. Getting better.
Yeah, that's good to hear. Why don't you tell us a little bit about where you come from? Introduce yourself and where you come from and your community and your nation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I'm from the Six Nations of the Grand River Territory. My background's a little bit complicated. Figure I might as well give you the long version rather than the short version for this purposes. I'm Haudenosaunee on my dad's side, and that's where things get a little bit complicated. So traditionally, you would inherit your nation and your clan from the mother. But from my case, going with my father, growing up on Six Nations, he was listed as being Cayuga because that's what his father was. And that's how the Indian agents processed us at that time, was going through trying to install a patriarchal structure and format, thinking, everything that they do is the right way, and where we deviate from them is going to be wrong. So trying to course correct us, I guess. But so my dad's mother was Mohawk, and his father was from the Cayuga Nation. And so on his status card, it says Cayuga. On my status card, it says Cayuga, but I identify as Mohawk. But I have both Cayuga and Mohawk as my background with my grandparents. On my mother's side, she's American by way of Ireland, as well as England and Scotland. Yeah, so
Just for our listeners, you're when you say Haudenosaunee, how do you say that?
Yeah, that's right, Haudenosaunee.
What is that like? What does that mean? Like, does that mean Mohawk or?
Yeah, so the more recognizable term for us is the Iroquois, but the Iroquois is a misnomer. It's not one of our actual words. And so a word that is one of ours is Haudenosaunee to describe ourselves. It means the people of the Longhouse, which would have traditionally been both a style of life and a living abode, but also a political and spiritual structure and a metaphor for our relationship with each other. These days, more so the latter details, our political and spiritual structure in the place of important rituals and ceremonies, but not necessarily a typical home.
Mm-hmm.
And so Iroquois is it's not the most polite term. And it doesn't come from us, so I use Haudenosaunee.
Sounds like it's a French word to me, the way it sounds and the way it's spelled. Is that
If
right?
my history is correct, it is derived from an Algonquin word, but it is not an exact replica of the Algonquin word. It's been, as you mentioned, anglicized would perhaps be the wrong word here. Um, I don't know what you would say, Frenchicized. I don't know what the word would be for that, but it has also
Okay.
undergone a little bit of a shift. But yeah, it doesn't originate from us.
Well, how much of the Mohawk language do you speak, and how much is spoken in your community?
Uh, for myself, not much. For my community, not a lot as well, but there are many fluent speakers, and there is a strong effort to rebuild the language. And so that goes across the board for the 6 languages. I'm not sure the state of Tuscarora, but in general, the other 5 nations are engaged in language revitalization. And these sorts of initiatives often span from the cradle to no age limit, whether language nests, immersion schools, adult immersion, a lot of different types of initiatives to help revitalize the language.
And now, a word from our sponsor. Ayaya songs are about our histories. Ayaya is an Inuit-owned firm that tells our stories in many languages across Canada. They are experts in publishing children's books, usually in syllabics, and they do large multilanguage projects like the reports of the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls Commission. If you need help getting your stories into classrooms or homes in Cree, Inuktitut, or other Indigenous languages, check them out at ayaya.ca. That's ayaya.ca. Ayaya is a proud sponsor of the Roots and Hoots podcast.
The first residential school in Canada, the Mohawk Institute of Brantford, operated from 1831 to 1970, and later became the Woodland Cultural Centre. What can you share about the significance of this place in the recent history of your community?
Well, it's pardon me. Obviously, it is a site of tremendous historical harm, but currently it's the Woodland Cultural Center, and it is becoming or has been a site of cultural revitalization for a while. It's a museum, cultural events, lots of things happening there. And if you go there, there's the original, original uh, residential area where the kids would have slept and lived. And then
Yeah.
there was the more temporary structure for classes. That part is the actual museum and cultural center. The other building has been uh, sometimes available for limited touring. It's been a place for meetings and administrative duties. It's housed the library. Its purposes and uses have changed over time, but also trying to preserve it as an important historical site. But yeah, that land has been returned to Six Nations, and the buildings to Six Nations, and for a while now, it's been a project of cultural strengthening.
Yeah. It's an old building that from the 1831. That's a long time. And
It is an old building, but it is not the original building.
oh, it's
So
not. Okay.
yeah, a lot of a lot of my roles and responsibilities involves teaching about these sorts of things, and I think an underappreciated aspect of this history is indigenous strength, resistance, and revitalization. And in terms of resistance, so the original Mush Hole Residential School, the students burned it down.
Oh, really? Wow. That's not the first
Yeah,
time I've heard something like this.
yeah, many residential schools were burned down by students.
Yeah.
If you
That
check out
is,
the TRC historical documents.
Yeah.
It has a section in there looking at fires at the residential schools, and I think it further divides them into accidents and those that were deliberately set by
Yeah.
the students.
Yeah. You mentioned part of the building that the Woodland Cultural Centre. Part of it is where the children used to sleep. Now, is that like a museum part? That's when you go in there? Do you actually see beds and stuff like that where the kids slept?
No, all the rooms have been repurposed. If you go down into the basement, I don't know currently what you would find in the basement, but not too long ago, not too many years ago, if you went down there, it would have still been a kitchen layout. But otherwise, all of the rooms are repurposed to other things. For instance, one of the rooms that would have housed many beds was then a library when I was there. I working there, not an attendee. It's before my time, and another large room that would have been where some of the boys slept is now or was recently a boardroom. Uh, I'm a little hesitant to say what's there now because I know for a little while there they had to limit access because they were doing repairs to the building.
Yeah.
As mentioned, it is old, and so I'm not sure what the state of it is now. It's been a while since I've been out there to the building.
Your reserve is the largest reserve in Canada and likely the most populated. Briefly tell us the history behind your reserve, your community.
So land-wise, the Six Nations is not the biggest reserve in Canada. Uh, Perhaps if you count the original intended size, but I would say that was also not a reserve. So as a reserve, as it is now, it is only about 6 by 7 miles large,
Uh,
which is much, much, much smaller than what the original territory was supposed to be of the Haldeman Land Act. So we are the most populated. The numbers vary, but I think we're somewhere around 27,000 people listed as being residents of Six Nations. However, I really doubt that there are that many people currently living there. It's more like that's what the registered population is, but we live near to or elsewhere, but are citizens of. So I'm not sure what the actual population on reserve is, but probably somewhere between 10 and 20,000, maybe 15, 13,000 people.
yeah, that's still quite significant in terms of, compared to most reserves in Canada. Like our reserve is only like 2,000 people on reserve, so it is quite populated. Your Mohawk Nation is part of the Iroquois Confederacy. Tell us about this and what makes up the Six Nations and the Confederacy, and do they all speak their language, or what's the state on that?
So unfortunately, all of the Haudenosaunee languages are threatened, and it's not a good situation for the language at the moment. But as I mentioned before, a lot of revitalization efforts are underway, and so hoping to see a large turnaround. But that's going to take time.
Yeah,
So each language is different, however, they are related, which is part of why we did form a confederacy together.
right.
So, like Sego is hello, but it can also be said Siguli or Scano, depending on the different group. So if I recall correctly, so Sego is Mohawk, Scano is Cayuga, and I think Siguli is Seneca. But yeah, you can see that there is a bit of similarity between them.
Yeah,
And if you're fluent in one, my understanding is that you can make pretty good headway in another, but it won't make you fluent in all.
yeah,
It just helps with the others.
yeah.
So yeah, they're all related. And so originally it's the Five Nations. So that's the Seneca, Cayuga, Onondaga, Oneida, and Mohawk, and then the Tuscarora joined later. As you refer to them as the Iroquois Confederacy, so I would just say that I would call it the Haudenosaunee Confederacy.
Now, do they all like all your reserves live in? I mean, all these the Six Nations. Um, they all have their own reserve. They all have their own community. I noticed that I drove to the States one time years ago, and I saw some signs of in New York State. I saw some Six Nations signs, communities that are they in? Are some of them in the States?
Yeah, so going back to your earlier question, so our homelands would have been what's in now New York State. We had we were in quite a stretch of territory that expanded up into northern Canada, but now where we are is a lot more restricted. So when the American Revolution came along, some of us sided with the British, some of us sided with the Americans, and some of us said, let's sit this out. And well, I think we all know how the American Revolution ended, but it didn't matter which side you were on. After the revolution was decided, George Washington and other supporters really wanted that prime indigenous land. And so they engaged in crop burning and kind of destroyed a lot of our food sources. So many of us accepted a offer from Britain to move over to this other area by the Grand River. That was the Haldeman Tract. And the reason why it's all Six Nations is because that was set aside for Mohawks and other members of the Haudenosaunee who wanted to move to this space to continue the Confederacy. And so now you have people from Six Nations living on both sides of the border. And the Six Nations specifically is all Six Nations, but other locations are going to be designated to a specific nation, like this is a Seneca Reserve or this is a Mohawk Reserve and so on. But Six
Yeah.
Nations is all of us.
Okay. So some of you are on the American side, some on the Canadian side. Is that correct?
Yes. And the Jay Treaty recognizes our ability to go back and forth because the border between Canada and the US is not our border.
Okay. Before we get into the treaty, which is kind of leading up to my next question, uh, before that, though, can you explain what the Haldeman Tract is?
That is the original outline of land set aside for the Six Nations. So it's supposed to be 6 miles on either side of the Grand River from mouth to source. That is not what it is today, but that is what is written in and agreed to in the Haldeman Tract.
Yeah. Okay. The Grand River, is that what it's called? That river that runs through the Six Nations?
Yeah.
That's the name, its official name is called the Grand River?
Yeah,
Yeah, okay.
it's pretty
What
grand.
what treaty did your nation sign with the Crown and how has it been maintained?
Well, I would say that it's a bit more complicated than what treaty was signed because I would argue that wampums are treaties and you don't sign wampums, you agree to them. And they are usually built with an agreement in from all represented parties. So it would go beyond any signed document to also include wampum treaties. And there are a few, and I would say that the history of their upkeep on the part of the Crown has not been great. But then, to be frank, which treaty has the Crown done a great job upholding?
You know, what is like you say you didn't have a signed treaty, so you had a wampum belt that's made of beads, I understand. And like how were you able to do a treaty using that mechanism or that thing, the wampum belt?
Yeah, so wampum belts are a collection of beads made out of quahog shells, and they're usually color coded, white and purple, and they involve quite a number of them, and they're used to represent the key concepts or ideas of the nature of the agreement. So, for instance, I think a lot of people might have heard of the two row wampum.
Right.
So the two row wampum, you'll see 3 rows of purple, 3 rows of white, 3 rows of purple, 3 rows of white, 3 rows of purple, and the two white pathways represent the Haudenosaunee canoe and the European boat, and they are side by side. They're parallel to each other. They're sharing the same water source, but they're not interfering with each other. And so it's kind of an agreement of non-interference in our ways of life. And if we live with this practice, we will have peace, friendship, and I always forget the third one. But basically, that's ideographic. They represent these things to be agreed to.
Right.
Now, that was originally made with the Dutch, but it is a principle behind all of our agreements with uh, the Crown. The Dutch are not the Crown, but when the
Yeah.
British came more into the territory, it was been a continued principle in all of our relationships.
Why did
So
you get involved with the Dutch?
uh, they like to get around, very big into ocean travel. Came along, wanted to make some deals. And yeah, if you read some Dutch history, you'll find them all over the world, knocking
Really?
at all sorts of different ports. They were one of the early uh, ocean traders.
Oh, geez, that's interesting. I didn't know that. So the Dutch were there before the British?
The Dutch were dealing with us before the British. I'd have to check my notes on who was first in the area in general. I do know that our relations with the Dutch were, I would argue, a lot better than they would be under the British. But the Dutch, they lost a lot of their battles with the British, and so they had to hand over territory and withdraw. And so British absorbed a lot of that.
Yeah. Do you have any today? Do you have any ties with the Dutch, the government or the people there?
So one of our chiefs approached the League of Nations. For those interested, the League of Nations was created after World War I to be a international governance body, so to speak, to help prevent further large wars. It failed, and that's how we got World War II. But before it failed, the one of our representatives approached it, and we were not a member state to the League of Nations, so we had to have somebody kind of vouch for us, so to speak. And so we approached the Dutch and asked if they would support our case coming forward before the League of Nations, and because of our old alliance and friendship, they agreed. And so the Sky presented our case before the League of Nations that the Canadian government was acting uh, quite hostile to our peoples and trying to subvert our sovereignty. And the Canadian government wasn't happy about this being aired in a international forum, so they pointed out the Dutch's own practice of coloniality in some other places, and the Dutch dropped their support of our case, and the Canadian government sent in the RCMP to Six Nations to attempt to dissolve our Confederacy government and install a band council and the Indian Act upon us
Right.
to mixed results.
Yeah.
a word from our sponsor. Ayaya songs are about our histories. Ayaya is an Inuit-owned firm that tells our stories in many languages across Canada. They are experts in publishing children's books, usually in syllabics, and they do large multi-language projects like the reports of the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls Commission. If you need help getting your stories into classrooms or homes in Cree, Inuktitut, or other Indigenous languages, check them out at ayaya.ca. That's ayaya.ca. Ayaya is a proud sponsor of the Roots and Hoots podcast.
I was hear about this longhouse, and it's kind of intriguing. I guess it's a traditional place of gathering for political purposes or for social events. Maybe you could just talk a little bit about the longhouse.
Yeah, in times further back, they were actually the places where we lived. A traditional earlier incarnation of a Haudenosaunee village or town would have the walls around multiple longhouses with very large family structures inside, supporting each other, growing crops, living their lives. It was also a site of politics and all of the important ceremonies and practices of the people. Nowadays, it is more so the political and spiritual structure, as I mentioned, rather than an actual person's living abode. And many Haudenosaunee continue to gather in them on a regular basis for all sorts of traditional affairs, discussion of governance, and all of that.
Yeah,
Very important practices. The metaphor for the Haudenosaunee is a longhouse. So all of the 5 nations of the original Confederacy have a role that kind of resembles what a individual longhouse would look like. So the Senecas are the guardians of the western door. Then there's the Hugas, younger brothers, the Onondagas, the keepers of the fire. They're in the center of the longhouse, the keepers of the fire. Then the Oneida, and then the Mohawks on the eastern side. That's the guardians of the eastern door. So even as the metaphor, it's a longhouse of all the 5 nations together.
I was at a cultural conference a few years back, and there was a guy there, an elder, who spoke about the great tree of peace, and we had about an hour classroom type discussion at a university um, lecture hall, and he spoke about the great tree of peace and how it came about, and I thought it was pretty fascinating. And he had 1 hour to tell us this, but he said to tell the story from beginning to end, takes like 7 days. We don't have that kind of time, but so maybe you can just, in a nutshell, if you can just try and tell our audience what the Great Tree of Peace is about.
Yeah, it's an important symbol and element of the story of the creation of the Confederacy itself. So, there's the creation story of the world, which is very important. Uh, for the Haudenosaunee, we had a time where there was a lot of great conflict amongst us and also with other external parties, and we weren't doing so well. And so the creator sent the peacemaker to bring us a message of what some would translate as peace, power, and righteousness, to help us end this conflict and live together in a better, more harmonious way. And so the culmination of the formation of the Confederacy and this new way of being, which is a way of peace, was that everyone would bring their weapons together and we bury them beneath a great white pine tree. And this white pine tree was planted by the peacemaker as a symbol of this peace. And the weapons underneath and the roots of the tree spreading out great distances as a great tree to offer anyone seeking this different way of life could follow those roots to the tree, to the Confederacy, and adopt these practices to have a more harmonious life, one at peace. Uh, the Haudenosaunee peace isn't just amongst ourselves; it also spells out relationships with other people outside of the Confederacy, as well as our relationship with the land.
Yeah.
So, like one of the things that is popularly talked about, I think, is the 7 generations. So you have to make a decision that's going to be good for 7 generations onwards. And if it's only going to be good for your generation, but not the next one, then you wouldn't do that. And so a lot of that ties very deeply into your relationship with the land, because you're going to need it to be there and be well for 7 generations.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the tree of peace is kind of that center, and that can guide people towards that different way of life if they are seeking that peace.
Yeah. So, the Six Nations were at war with each other and other external communities, places,
Yeah.
people at one time, and I heard that there was some cannibalism involved, and from what I heard, anyway, I could be wrong, and that the peacemaker, was somewhat or some kind of Jesus, is the kind of comparison that I heard, that I was told. What's your feeling on this?
I think that would require a great deal of discussion about what Jesus means to the person asking, and what Jesus means to people at large before that could really be a comparison made.
Yeah.
I think it doesn't really need to be a comparison.
Mm.
Uh, Someone sent by the Creator to bring about peace, who did it through dialogue and speaking with the different communities and having people come together in like mind. But uh, there's no help. There's no eternal punishment. In fact, one of the great obstructors of the peace, Tarudaho, he was said to have snakes in his hair, metaphor for the kind of energy he brought to life. He was a powerful man, both as physical, but also with spiritual powers. And he caused great harm, and peace would have been seen as not good for him. It would have harmed how he formed his strength. So he opposed the creation of the Confederacy, but through dialogue, through uh, understanding what the peace meant, and through inviting him to an important role in the Confederacy, uh, he, as is described, the peacemaker combed the snakes out of his hair, and he became a member of the Confederacy. So the peace is achieved not by eliminating the opposition, but by somehow finding common ground and building peace with them. And so I leave it to listeners to decide if that's uh, different from or similar to how Christianity is structured.
Yeah. Very interesting. Yeah. Uh, we hear a lot of people talking about reconciliation these days, and it's a buzzword that's been going around for the last few years. And what is your feeling on reconciliation? What does it mean to you when you hear the word reconciliation? Is it appropriate for the time we're in?
I think it is a complicated and challenging word, and I have seen some groups say, reconciliation is dead, and I've seen others very much gravitate towards the power of pursuing reconciliation. And I would say that for myself, I think it's worth pursuing and worth discussing what it means with others. Reconciliation is not something we can define on our own. It's something that has to be built between the two or more parties that are involved in the act. I would like to say that reconciliation involves a resetting of relationships to be balanced, and that it involves real material resources being redistributed. That might be scary to some, but I think that if our goal is a peace that's based on justice, then I think we have to structure things very differently between Indigenous peoples and the Canadian state. And that is going to be a long and difficult process.
Yeah. Well said, Andrew. Is there anything else you'd like to touch on for our audience?
Well, it's been an interesting conversation. I was just wondering, what do you think about reconciliation?
Others, I don't know. It's hard for me to say. Uh, I think it's like you said, it's a long, difficult journey, and it's not as easy as it sounds, and it's not as easy as some people think. And it's going to be both sides. I think there's basically two parties involved here, and we really have to educate both sides and know the history and work together and try and move forward. So, yeah, there's so many. It's just you're talking to people. I've heard so many different interpretations and different feelings about reconciliation, but it is the fact that people talk about it and people, actually are making efforts to make life better for everybody in Canada. That's great. So I'm happy about that.
You have made me think of something I do like to bring up in these sorts of conversations. So one, that education is so important towards building up effective dialogues where it's not one party is informed and the other party is completely ignorant of the history and the present. So we need to have a more informed conversation, and that's built on education.
Right.
So I very much agree there. And I think people need to understand, I mentioned the different way of how we handle resources, but I think it's also important to remember that the old adage is true. A rising tide lifts all boats. And so if Indigenous peoples are doing well in Canada, Canada is doing well. And it should not be viewed as a loss to Canada that Indigenous peoples are doing better than they have been.
Well said. Well said. I've been talking to Andrew Bomberry from the Six Nations Confederacy of the Grand River. Thank you for taking the time, Andrew. It's nice talking to you.
My pleasure.
Yeah.
Good to see you again.
Yes, likewise. Thank you. Merci. Nakamik. How do you say thank you in Mohawk?
Yeah.
Niawen. That's right. I should know that. Niawen, Andrew. Okay.
Roots and Hoots is a podcast project produced by the Legacy of Hope Foundation. For episode show notes, please visit the podcast description and make sure to like, subscribe, and leave a review. For more information about the work we do, please visit legacyofhope.ca.